Jake, can you walk through for people the publishing split, the reason why being the songwriter is so vitally important when it comes to syncs and placements?
Traditionally, when you're writing a song, you have a writer's share, which if you co-write, the other writers retain that writer's share. And there's also a publishing share component to that composition. And you can look at the publishing component as essentially an asset that can be bought and sold. And both the writers and the publishing are both designed to create income. I mean, to basically receive income coming in for that composition. By and large, the writer's share doesn't ever change hands. That's sort of put in place so that the original writers, even if they don't even know what's happening around with the publishing and the record and the recording, will always have a stream that pops up in their mailbox or in their computer because of stuff happening. The publishing side is an asset which can be bought and sold. That's the business that we are in. We dive a lot deeper in that we help generate and sort of focus the writing to best suit what our needs are and where we think we can, artists don't generally like this word, but exploit the composition and the copyright, which is essentially what we're doing. And so the writers can choose any number of avenues for the publishing portion of the composition. They can retain it if they don't want anybody touching it. They can get into a co-publishing deal where they're literally splitting the portions of the publishing with another company. They can sell the entire publishing portion if they want. Those are all at the discretion of the writer. And the publishing portion, which generates income as well, that's how publishing companies are in business, because they find a composition, or they create a composition that's of value, they exploit it and go find homes for it, sync, radio, retail, whatever, that generates income. And if, they oftentimes, publishing companies tend to do co-pub splits, so then they are retaining some portion of the income that comes in the publishing side, and then some portion of that publishing side is also rerouted back to the writer as well, on top of their performance income of the writer's share. So that's an attempt at a simplified version. It's actually much more complex than that, and it doesn't even take into account the master and recording portion, which also needs to be licensed. If someone's going to, in fact, license a song, they need to license the composition, which is the music and the lyrics, and they need to license the recording, the actual tangible recorded. And those are, when you are licensing both at the same time, that's considered all in, which is the term I used before. If it's not all in, then you're referring to licensing one segment and also the other segment.
Paul, if I could have 30 seconds to piggyback off there. From a manager's perspective, right, I think we have a similar view as a publisher, but at the end of the day, I'm hired to protect my clients, right, and that they are doing the work in a room and getting compensated for it, right? And if we're talking about splitting up a song, right, the way this works is at the end of the session, everyone decides okay, I did this much on the song. And sometimes these things get really ugly, because if even one person disagrees, no one gets paid, right? So one person can step out and say, well, I think I did this much of the song, and if you disagree, then we're all gonna, so you might as well pay me the extra bit, or you're gonna get paid zero, right? So you can either get paid zero, or you can get a reduced amount, and they can get pretty nasty. They get so nasty, it's actually gone to court, and the courts have said, look, if you played the drums on the song and you did the drum parts, that's worth 5% of the song, and if you did the lyrics, that's worth 20-something% of the song. So the courts have a system, but at the end of the day, it doesn't go there, right? Generally, you're doing so many sessions, you're getting to the point where you're saying, okay, well, if you did the music and I did the lyrics and melody, right, maybe that's half and half. And if I have someone help me on the lyrics, then I'm going to give my 50% cut in this other person, and they're going to take, and if you did all the music, then you keep your 50%, even though there's a bunch of people. I might have 10 people help me with the lyrics. You still keep your 50%. I'm going to split up my 50% 10 ways. Generally, the way we've done these sessions is if there's 3 people all in a room together, then everyone just gets an equal amount, because you're kind of all coming up with ideas together and maybe someone, and it keeps it clean and simple. I have seen a lot of sessions where at the end of the session, sometimes it gets very particular of like, well, no, I did this and I did this and I did this, and that's also a very fair way to split things up too, as long as there's an understanding among everyone of how this is going to work. I think the difficulty becomes, and hopefully this answers your question and from a management perspective, is, if you have a writer and they get maybe a large personality, or they have someone who absolutely feels like they contributed the key component of why the song got synced, and even though it's just this tiny little piece, maybe it is the reason, it's the most memorable part, it's a tiny little riff in a song or something like that. How do you equitably decide how much of the song that's worth? Because once you decide on these numbers, you get paid an upfront fee, right, to use the song, but almost always you get residuals, right? And so this money just comes in forever and ever, and that money is divided up based on these percentages that you've agreed upon. So part of the nuance, I think, as a manager, as we're filling this out, is like, how do you figure out the teams where everyone works together creatively? They're sort of like-minded in their approach towards things. There's like so many layers on top of like, how do these teams work, right? And then you add in Jake's perspective to all of this, and you potentially add in a label's perspective, and you could have, I've been in situations where you've had 10 different perspectives of how something should operate, and it's not that any of them are right or wrong, right? They're just very different approaches.
Awesome. Thank you. Evelyn, as a musician, when you hear all that has been talked about so far, if you can try to imagine being a musician before everything happened for you, how do you hear this and get excited, don't get intimidated, and what would your advice be to people who, as you were talking about earlier, want to get into this lane from zero?
From zero. I've come from zero to get into this lane, and I think it's just a huge part is it's doable, and also a little tiny bit to touch on what Michael was just talking about when it comes to splits and stuff like that. A greater thing, like a piece of advice I would have to say, is be cool, man. Like, this is an industry of collaboration. If you are an artist, a writer, an instrumentalist, a producer, an engineer, you be yourself. Have, a little bit of the ego that got you in that room to begin with, but also drop some of the ego and be someone who's known not just for the great work that you'll do, but also as being someone who's amicable to work with, someone who is interested in the music and how well the music's going to do, not just you as, a solo entity. I think that's super important. Be a little bit of a team player, even if you want to be the next Billie Eilish. Like, I think she's awesome. She's kind. And I think people should know that is a huge aspect to this, is being able to like really work well, because a lot of it is getting in the rooms with people that you work really well with over and over and over again, and being fair about your splits so that the songs you create get better and better, and they can wind up in better and better homes. And all I would say to anyone else who's trying to get into this lane is really stay focused. Do your homework for sure. Pay attention to what you were hearing on shows like Euphoria, like all these cool shows that are really cutting edge with their soundtracks. What are you loving? What's working? And then I would also just say, again, diversify what you're working on. You never know what's really gonna hit. So, doing a couple of different things, and then just working a ton, doing a ton of sessions, being willing to kind of work on whatever you can get your hands on, and paying attention to what makes really good people really good, and kind of working toward that.
Thank you, everyone. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Mike,
thank you.
wrap us up. I got to say, my mind's blown. I don't know how you keep on bringing these people in and then they're better than one from the next. Thank you all so much. I don't even know how else to say it, but this is such a demystifying of an area of the music business that there's just so rarely a light shed on it. And I feel like you guys have done, there's still so much more, but man, I feel so much smarter than I was an hour and a half ago, and a hell of as smart as I should have been 25 years ago. So this is awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very humbled to even just listen in. This has been a great, great group. And, you know, much like I think the recurring theme in here is, you know, persistence and being nice and figuring out who you know. And, you know, really through these connections is how this panel came together. And that's, you know, been kind of marvelous. As you said, we've touched like very top level stuff, but incredibly insightful. I mean, how great is it to have, you know, though Jake does wear a manager hat, which is part of why I think I really love the position, no pun intended, that he holds in all of this. But, you know, we've got an artist, a manager, you know, a supervisor, and a publisher. And then I'm not sure what I do. But yeah, really, this is fantastic. And, you know, I think these guys did such a great job of explaining your question about, you know, why it's important to, you know, whatever, the component, the asset, as Jake indicated. That's a really complicated subject for many people, even that, you know, friends of mine that have been in this business a long time, and even myself, that's probably the last part that really started to make sense for me as I did more and more of this stuff. And Evelyn, what great words of advice. Be cool. I think that's really where this industry is going. As you know, these guys talked about with the being more and more opportunities. You know, we sort of talk about, you know, when you're all fighting over one slice of pizza, it's really, you know, it gets pretty particular. I want the pepperoni, or I want the, you know, the onion. Evelyn seemingly has not only created her own pizza, but, you know, presumably has her own pizza oven to bake it in. So you just don't get into those petty arguments anymore.
I like pizza. What can I say?
Yeah. Awesome. All right. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.